know, I mean, this is like for me, and because in the talk, everyone can say, well, I only finished it for a long time.
You should show me some.
That's great fun. mixture. And I looked at the painting over there in the room when you show. There's kind of the cross and some what do you call it, cercueil. My English is
on the right hand side.
Yeah, some hearses and stuff. And it's funny because there's a film by Jean Roche and Brice Aoudou. This is a guy I'm telling you at the Musée de l'Homme in France.
Yeah.
They were commissioned to do 3 films for the centenary of the French Revolution, and they came across in this park, a group of Haitians doing the sacrifice, opposite the cemetery where Napoleon was buried, and they did the same drawing that I see there. Because and they sacrificed 2 chickens. They had a mirror, and the mirror was serving as because they couldn't get into the cemetery.
Are you going to sit here? Everyone's seated. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. This is one of the first gallery talks that we've had here, and I'm really delighted to introduce Johnny Jonklis, who's the artist who's put together all this work. And this is the first time that it's been shown. And I have to say, as curator of the gallery, I'm absolutely delighted to have such a fantastic, vibrant piece of work here. And I think you'll probably agree, those of you who've known the Phoenix for a while, this has got to be one of the most exciting and ambitious projects that we've had. So I'm not going to waffle on any longer. I'll let these two do it for me. So yes, Johnny Jonklis, who's the artist, and Professor Susan Hayward, who's Director of Film Studies at Exeter University.
Thanks, okay. Essentially we're going to just have a little bit of sort of a conversational exchange around a series of issues, and then open it up as quickly as possible to the audience, because surely you'll have some questions around the production that you've been to witness or be part of or be drawn into. But I want to start off first of all by asking Johnny to locate himself in terms of a filmmaker. So my questions are going to start there, then we'll move towards Darren, and then towards what Johnny's actually done in relation to the film. So that's how the questions are going to be staggered, and then we'll open it up. So Johnny, I want to start off by asking you the following question in relation to the fact that you are a video artist, you're an art gallery installation filmmaker, you've also made documentaries, and I'm familiar with quite a lot of your work now. And my feeling is that there are two strands that come through very, very strongly. And one of them is your ability to frame shots, which is already an incredible gift, but also your ability to edit, which does fit into what you've been doing with this particular piece of work. And I wondered if you'd like to talk just a little bit in general terms about your work to start with, and then we'll move on to Darren, so that people can have a sense of where you're coming from.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for coming. I appreciate it a lot, and excuse me, I'm a little nervous. Well, predominantly over the last few years, I've been making documentary works, like Susan said, mostly for galleries. A lot of the work that I've done is with Marcus Faget, who is a person that we have a real affinity in making work together, and we enjoy actually collaborating. And one thing about filmmaking is it is about collaboration, so I actively like to collaborate with other people. Within the field of documentary, I guess what I've really tried to focus on is not my own agendas, but I like to put myself into the situation and then soak it up like a sponge. So I'm not really reflecting my own opinions, but the opinions that I find around me. And this was sort of, this comes through very much in the work, like I made a film in Channington Prison about the drug therapy unit, which is a prison in a prison there, and I spent a month to 6 weeks actually in the prison, living like a prisoner, playing a lot of backgammon and hanging out with them. And in fact, we hung out for about a week before we even picked up a camera. And then I got a lot of the inmates to actually do a lot of the shooting. So I would say my style of work, really, in the documentary field is more influenced by what's around. And then what tends to happen is if you're across a production company, you will go in there with your own agenda and bend everything to your own agenda, whereas I prefer looking at it the other way. And for me, that's quite interesting because for me, with all my films, it's about finding out something that I'm interested in. And I suppose with the Darren film, it felt very unfinished to me. She didn't actually cut it herself. It was her raw footage was turned into a film in the late 70s by an associate of hers that she worked with for quite a few years. And I felt that as she herself she actually in her own words said that she couldn't make a film out of it. And I think the reason that she couldn't was because she felt so intuitively tied into voodoo and the metaphor of it, and it was almost too close to her own style of filmmaking.
Do you want to give us some more context around Darren's thinking of filmmaking and then your attraction to her?
I don't know how many people actually know my Darren, but she's quite a famous experimental filmmaker, predominantly working in the 30s and 40s. With one of her most famous films was Meshes the Afternoon. And her work, she was a dancer as well, and a choreographer, and her work is all based around ritual and dance and movement and metaphor. She was a poetic filmmaker, and I think that she was attracted to voodoo very much for the ritual reasons, the dance reasons, and of course the tremendous amount of visual metaphor that there is within the voodoo religion. And you know, it's quite documented in her own writings and where she was never happy with the film, and she felt that it was very much an uncompleted project for her. So I felt that gave me a license to actually re-explore her original footage and try to drag out the metaphor in the form of a 3D installation.
Do you want to talk some now about the way in which you, in a sense, you've not reconstructed it, but you've certainly, I think, regenerated it, made it something else, something that it was, but also something more. So would you like to talk about how you went about thinking through remaking or restructuring it, and then we'll talk about the exhibition in a global sense.
Well, the first problem I came up against, I think, was a problem that Darren did, which was wanting to keep an authenticity and a legitimacy to the actual voodoo practices. So this is why I split it into two screens. And on the major screen, which is in the centre of the mirrors, it's very much the narrative of the different voodoo practices. Which I felt that for a couple of reasons I didn't want to play around them. I thought it would be disrespectful
Yeah.
actually to the ceremonies themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that this was the problem that she had, because originally, you see, this was a commission in 1946. It was from the Guggenheim Fellowship, and it was the first filmmaker to actually receive a commission from the Guggenheim. And that's why she went out to Haiti to over 3 years to film these things. And in the end, she wrote a book. But I think that to me it felt unfinished, and there were things that I could do there, and that's why I wanted to keep the narrative whole.
Yeah.
And what I've actually done is I've gone way more back to the source. So I've sort of stripped the film back to its bare roots,
Yeah.
and gone back to the source material, and then gone back to the source material audio as well. And then what I've tried to do is then jump over the documentary and explore the poetic metaphor that, of course, Darren is known for it within the films. And I'll just say, Darren, in her own words, when she was describing her own work, she tried to structure her films under the banner of Aristotle's Poetics. So what she would do is, if she was looking at very much the epic and the tragic form, and what she would say is, with her own sort of structure and editing of her work, is you'd have one which was the narrative, which is the straight line, horizontal going along, but then she'd have poetic verticals. And the best way to describe this is if you actually look at a William Shakespeare play, you can have, in any of the plays of Shakespeare, you can have the narrative that bubbles the story along, but then say like in Hamlet, you might have Hamlet doing a soliloquy for 10 minutes, where what he's doing is he's describing the metaphor around where he's actually placed in the story, which doesn't really fit with the narrative, but you see it's expanding the narrative as well. So what I was interested in was trying to expand and really mix narrative and poetic form together, which is what I've tried to do in all my documentaries, especially the one that I made with Marcus, which was funded by Hornhead Arts, which is The Ring of Bells, where we really did try to focus in on metaphor within the screen and within the frame, and how we framed it. And what I did was I took those ideas that Marcus and I were playing with the Hornhead Arts film, and then I wanted to try to push them forward into the Darren film. But because of the nature of the film and not really wanting to play around with the actual narrative too much, I thought the best way to try to sort of push and expand the metaphor and the poetics around it was to create a two-screen installation and really play with the metaphor within the 3D space instead of just the frame.
Which I think works very. Do you want to talk a little bit about the real imperative of the cross and the moments that you have when it actually works in that 3D and then goes continually through the mirrors?
Well, you see, this is the other thing, is with Darren, I mean, she was very interested in these ideas of the linear story and then the verticals.
Yeah.
So there's lots of, the cross is a motif very much in her own work.
Yeah.
And of course in Voodoo, which we have on the back wall there, is the centre post and the cross is the starting point for all Voodoo religion. This is where the gods are given the gateway to raise from the ground, as heaven is actually under the earth in Voodoo religion. So for me, you see, actually one of the reasons I think Darren had a lot of problems with the film is that she felt too emotionally close to it because it really mirrored her own style of working. So for me, you see, when I came back to it, I really wanted to actually increase the metaphor of voodoo within it, but also the metaphor of Darren. They're very, very similar. And the whole idea is, you see, the idea is with the installation and the mirrors bouncing it backwards and forwards, it's when both screens are on, there's an optical illusion where it creates the cross within the film. So that is then the conduit for the spiritual side to come through. And the thing about voodoo as well is mirrors are incredibly important within voodoo religion, as they are in most West African religions as well. It's the voodoo term for it is this is the real world, and in the mirror is the spiritual world. So mirrors are used to amplify the spirits. And that's another reason why I encased it in the mirrors. So it's really a 3D visual metaphor for Darren and voodoo.
Right, I think what I'd like to do now is sort of see if some of the things that Johnny's been saying open up some questions that you might like to ask, or you know, things that just don't seem clear to you that you'd like to have perhaps clarified by Johnny. Is there anybody who wants to come in now with some comments or questions? Could be any order. Yeah, John.
Discuss about the logistics of trying to set up that idea the whole time.
Well, God, it took a while. I mean, logistically, it was quite a difficult thing to set up. I did sort of get some small pieces of glass and build like a little scale model to try it out. Because of my history of working, you know, originally, you know, many years I've worked in TV and film, and also working in the club scene as well. You know, I know a lot about nature of light, so I had an idea that it would work that way, but
You didn't know until it was finally
no,
installed.
I mean, I didn't know until it would actually work that it would work. So I'm quite happy it did. I mean, to be honest with you, the bit of genius was bouncing it back off the white wall, because originally it was going to be in the centre of the space and then that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of sort of happy mishaps that have allowed it to get to where it is, really.
Perhaps it's the voodoo creeping in. Sorry, just in relation to what you just said, perhaps it's the voodoo creeping in, because you're saying that you know, they use the mirrors to reflect back to decide what's there. Perhaps you know, in your own work, sometimes, you know...
Can't hear the question, sorry.
Sorry, I actually didn't say a question, I was just commenting on what Johnny had just said about, at the end, it just happens like that, almost a certain amount of serendipity or whatever you'd like to call it. So perhaps that's the voodoo in the situation in some respects, in as much as you've got in the voodoo religion the mirror reflecting back and getting you to look at things that are in a different perspective or away from its central core. And the same, you know, is effectively
very much
happened
so.
in your work.
Very much so. I mean, I was very conscious of that and really wanted that to come through. I mean, I also was very conscious of being respectful to the voodoo religion. You know, I mean, one of the problems is people there's different aspects of voodoo. There's the religious, spiritual, metaphysical side of voodoo, but there's also within voodoo the more ritual magic side. People always focus on the petro-ritual magic side and forget about actually the metaphysical, religious side of voodoo. That's very important, and that's what I want to try and focus on. You know,
No, it's just the way we look at things is intriguing and lots of different ways. And when there's a lot going on in a single space, you can focus on it for some time. And when lots of different things are going on all over the place, I'm intrigued by most people's reaction, as you see it, in terms of getting the best from this 3D metaphor, which is really quite a complex thing to sort of take on board.
Yeah, I realise that. I mean, it's up to I think the individual to walk around the space and try it out in different ways. It's not for me to direct.
No, truly, I just wondered if you've noticed that people actually felt or went through different kinds of reactions.
There's been quite a few different reactions to it. I've had people walking out crying because they've been so moved by it, and other people hating it. A lot of people tend to watch it in one spot, where of course they need to move around it to really get the full power of it. And the other thing I wanted to say was I've deliberately tried to not intellectualize this, actually. I've tried to keep my research down to a minimum because I wanted to keep myself open to being able to serendipity, exactly. And it's very important in filmmaking. Marcus and I, when we're making our own films, we live by serendipity. And I wanted to keep myself open to the voodoo experience, which is it's not a dogma religion, where everywhere it moves, you can have one set of voodoo rituals in one place outside of Port-au-Prince, and 10 miles away they could be the same ritual but different. It's about how the individual incorporates it into his own way of thinking. So I really tried to, I had to know, of course, parts about voodoo, parts about Derren, but there was my own intuition within that I really wanted to play with, and also within the space. Over the last 5 days I've been painting these pictures, and I decided to run the line from Ogun, who's one of the very big voodoo gods and the sacred oratory of the drum, through to the gallery where the drum is, to trying to add more power to it. So I've sort of been working my own ritual into the voodoo ritual as well. And for me, this is very much a beginning. as this show tours, everything around it will change and will be affected by the influences in the places that it's at. And in a year's time, I will be going to Haiti to make my own film as well.
I'm just sorry, just one last. Do you feel inclined to build more features into kind of future 3D?
I don't know. This is a real departure for me. I've explored, like Marcus and I, and in my own work as well, be exploring like multiple screens and seeing the same action from. It's like with the prison film. It was a dual screen film on a widescreen, and what you'd see is like there was one part in it where a guy was up for failing his drug test, and he was having to be like he was sort of sitting there, and then there was a panel of 3 that were interviewing him. So in the film you'd see the panel of 3, and then you see his reactions. What I've done before is try to sort of film things from multiple points of view, but mix them all together, so you're getting like a holistic film. And with Darren and her own work, it was very much about being holistic. So I wanted to sort of, so I felt quite intuitively tied into Darren with this, and felt I had a sort of understanding about where she was coming from. And so the intuition part was quite important, but the actual sculptural 3D aspects of this is very different from what I would normally do. So it's been a bit of a departure really, but you know, I wanted to explore other ways of showing film really.
Ben?
I just wanted to ask, where did you take the text from, the actual narration?
Right, well the text that's in there is actually Darren's own words. Yeah. Because, you know, I mean, what I've done is that basically everything is coming from Darren in some sort of way, and I've restaged it, reused it, worked myself into it a little bit. With the Voodoo Altar, that was all things that I found in my house to make a basic Voodoo Altar, which I wanted to do, you know. But this is very much a beginning and almost a template, and as it moves, the idea is like Voodoo, it will soak up lots and lots more influences, because you have to bear in mind that Voodoo is, you know, there's a huge amount of Catholicism in Voodoo, as well as a lot of different beliefs from different parts of West Africa that were all amalgamated into it. I mean, I'll just tell you a little bit about the history of Voodoo so you can see where it comes from. A lot of disparate tribes and disparate people were thrown together in Haiti because of the slave system in the 1720s, 1730s, 1740s, 1750s. So to keep their own empowerment and their own sense of belief, they ended up amalgamating a lot of different West African belief together. Okay? Also, because of their overseers and the Catholicism within that, that also crept into Voodoo quite a lot. Whether it was partly to appease the overseers or whether it was partly because there's other influences, I don't know. But the other major thing that gets forgotten about in Voodoo is there's a huge amount of South American religion that's been incorporated into it as well, from the indigenous people that were also caught up in the slave trade. And that's very obvious within the pictures, especially if you look at the Divine Horsemen. It's very Mayan, you know. So it's really a mixture of 3 core religions that have sort of evolved. And the weird thing about Voodoo is a weird dichotomy between personal involvement and your own personal take on these different beliefs, but then the actual act of possession is about losing yourself and being overtaken by your God. I mean, the reason the show's called Divine Horsemen is because that is how in Voodoo they would look at possession. The idea is that the Divine Horseman is the God, and you are the horse, and so you're being ridden by your God. But the thing to also bear in mind in Voodoo within that, as a powerful human being, or as a Hugan, you can accrue more power in death and become a god yourself as well. And also, through becoming a god yourself, you can actually be more powerful than the basic sacred Voodoo gods. So it's very much about, there's an aspect of empowerment of the individual within it, but there's also the whole idea of it's actually losing yourself to your God, really.
Yes.
In the Voodoo religion, you were talking about the 3 sort of core influences of it, that West African and the old traditions and the Catholicism, and that the tension in play between those two. Is that something that you took on, that influenced your piece a lot?
That's the right word. I mean, you know, within Haitian Voodoo, it wouldn't be seen as tension. you know, it's a very all-encompassing religion. It's about, if someone has a different point of view, we'll take it on board and we'll incorporate it in. I mean, the major important thing about voodoo, and the reason why it's how it is the crossroads. And that is really, the crossroads is where the physical world and the spiritual world meet, and where you can raise the gods from the earth. And for me as well, the crossroads really symboled in Darren the narrative and the poetic vertical. And I think that's why she had so many problems actually turning it into a film, because she felt too intrinsically tied into it. I mean, when she actually first went out to Haiti, one of the reasons why she was able to film these things, and she was the first person to actually properly film Haitian voodoo ritual, was because they actually intuitively accepted her as a priestess because of her own beliefs. They could tell that within her work and within her attitude that she really almost symbolised voodoo, so she was very much accepted in and allowed to film these, and the first person too. And that's another reason which drew me to it, is that as a historical document, you see, I want to go and make my own film, but as a historical document, it's a very important one that not many people know about, and I wanted to bring the film back up again and let other people experience it. And what's that? There's another point, but I've forgotten.
Some more comments, queries around it? Yeah, Patrick.
Is the voodoo culture strong today? Is it
Definitely so, yes.
more stronger?
It's hard, I don't know, but it's certainly very, very strong today, yes. I mean, in lots of ways, voodoo is a very modern religion. It's quite postmodern in how it is. It's about taking on board everything. Like, I can't remember the name of the museum, but it's in South London, where they had a voodoo exhibit of altars, and the altars were all made out of Coke cans. So you see, it's about grabbing what is around you, and then using your own metaphor, and your own metaphor for your religion, and then making it a sacred object. I mean, an example of that is with the drumming. They're drums that would be used normally for other things, you know, but when it comes to them being used for voodoo practice, the drums are blessed and made sacred. Okay, so it's a very pragmatic religion, actually.
It looks like total improvisation. You know, it's just. I mean, they look like they're making it up as they're going along.
Well, that's a very important aspect of it, and that's why, in lots of ways, I really didn't want to do too much research, because I wanted to keep myself open to the intuitive side of it. It's about, a lot of it is about the intuition side of it, you know, it's about bringing up the spirits to overtake your, well, you know, in voodoo, you know, in lots of ways, you know, the spirits are with you always, you know. It's not they don't keep their God separate, their God is with them. You know, and it's very much about bringing the divine to the person.
Some other responses or queries? Johnny, perhaps you could just then finish on telling us a little bit about where you've hinted at where you want to go with this, that it's going forward in a travel of its own.
Yeah. And it's very much an intuitive travel. I mean, in lots of ways, I mean, what I've done is tried to put myself into Darren's mindset, into voodoo mindset, and just tried to sort of, what's the word? Not induce it, but you know what I mean, just sort of flow it. So not try to think about it, but just almost like stick myself, which I do in all my films, all my documentaries. It's about me placing myself into the position of the people that I'm filming or the things that I'm talking about, and just try and let that soak through my psyche. So, you know, I was trying to sort of not intellectualize it as much as possible, and that's why it's a beginning. And so it will, I mean, I hope to have, I mean, really, the major thing for me is for it to evolve like voodoo evolves. And to soak up influences. Well, yeah, because, you know, the more I get into it, the more I'm actually having quite a love for the religion and quite a sort of spiritual link to it. So I would like to go out there and make my own film, which can be shown with this as well, you know. So, because, I mean, you see what I mean? It's not enough for me just to push Darren's film in a different direction and to sort of work around what she was doing. That, for me, that was a template at the beginning. The ending is, of course, when I've made my own purely my own film, which I can sort of show with it. And the other point I just want to make very quickly is Darren shot this as an ethnographic work. Though one of the reasons why the film wasn't shown is because at the time it wasn't viewed as an ethnographic film, because there are very stringent requisites for what is considered ethnographic or not. But what I've done is when I've actually taken the film, where she looked at voodoo in an ethnographic way, I sort of looked at her film in an ethnographic way. You see, as a whole, as a historical piece of ethnographic work, and so I sort of, it almost tried to, on one level, tried to divorce myself from what it's about, and tried to treat it as a sort of ethnographic artifact.
Okay, well I think we'll draw ourselves to something of a conclusion here, and let's be in conversation over drinks for those of you who have questions you want to ask Johnny but didn't feel you could in a more public forum.
Don't feel you've got to run off, the film be on for a while.
And thank you very much for coming so numerous and being here to share this really extraordinary installation with you. I think it is a remarkable piece of work, and I do wish you a lot of luck with it. And thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And just one thing I'd like to say before you go is the Bells film was commissioned by Your Head Arts. It will be shown in other places in different forms, so hopefully you'll all hear about that and come to that when it's been shown in other places. Thank
you. As usual. It's a great exhibition. I'll ask permission to take photos.
Yes, he will let you.
It's for PR purposes, actually. So I'll send one or two to the music development so I can read with the letter. What we could do is send it electronically if you want, with an attachment. I'll take a few pictures and I'll send them to you so I can put something together.
Yeah, lovely.
It's a good contact, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.